Thank you. Thank you very much for having me also part of this fantastic lineup of speakers. It's really wonderful to be here. So we actually heard a lot about precarity, and we think about the Earth every time we talk about precarity today, with like the lack of resources, how we address our home actually, and especially that we're at a point where humanity is reaching a tipping point, where we're in Anthropocenic times. What is always very striking is to think also that as human beings, we're more composed of microbes actually than we have actually human cells. So 43% of our body is only constituted of human cells. So that makes me wonder how much architecture, how much nature there is in architecture. And how can architecture and space making be, in a way, an emergence, or as if we are digging actually to find our spaces? How can they be more anchored in their environment, looking at this obelisk that was found in Egypt, as if it's sculpted from the place, from the memory of the place, but also from the material of the place. So it's kind of an evolutionary process where we're looking at typologies, trying to scan them, to learn from them, but also to reinvent them. Thinking also about like how to make with the hand, but also with different medium of work. And maybe situating architecture between the past, between archaeology as the past know-how, between nature and humanity, but also in relation to the future. As every time we are building something new, we're really reinventing something and bringing newness. Somebody asked about healing this morning, and it's a question that I've been thinking about in my practice, thinking how to deal with places that had lived crisis, and can architecture do something? One of the first projects that I had to work on was this competition that we won back in 2006, and it's the Estonian National Museum. And what was particular about this project is that it's set in Tartu. So Tartu is the cultural capital of Estonia. It had also lived the Soviet occupation. It has one of the largest military airfield, ex-Soviet military airfield in the area. So it is also a site that hasn't been urbanized because of what it bared as memory, as a kind of form memory for Estonia. So the museum here, building a national museum for Estonia, was about, in a way, transforming that history, or maybe like not ignoring that scar that existed on site, this kind of line that crosses endlessly that ground, and thinking about the spaces of the past, even if they bear negative memories, as spaces that could be reappropriated and reused. And thinking also about the museum as a national museum, as a bearer of an open identity, where cultural identity can be constantly reconstructed and constituted. Thinking sometimes also that some of the spaces that we design as architects are used in different ways, actually. This is the structure of the canopy that you just seen in the photo before. And it's used by artists and cinematographers to make installations. And also, like, maybe defending generosity of spaces, even if we are in a functionalist period, maybe space making is actually the place where people get together and are able to transform and create a community together, transform an identity, appropriate the context, and sit within climate. When we talk about climate and working in Estonia, where we reach -20 in wintertime, I got to be really conscious about the question of building and how to be bioclimatic and respond to a context. And here in France, we're building the first passive low-carbon manufacturing building in Normandy. And it's really interesting because it gets you, as Philippe just explained, to really get very close to the technique of a building, like really understand it, measure it, calculate all the material, and think about a bioclimatic design that responds to natural resources. And just by doing that, we notice that we really get close to the comfort zone of a human being. So we need less energy, actually, to climatize and to heat our buildings. And besides that, also thinking about the hand and the resources that we have to use, thinking about how to bring know-how into a building, we identified like brick makers that are very close to the site and decided to construct the whole building in brick using local resources, as it's much less carbon because you don't bring your material from very far away. You just use the site earth and start to manufacture the bricks. And we just, with this project, manufacturing 550,000 bricks, we started actually reviving an industry that was starting to disappear in Normandy. And also thinking about the measurement of every component of that project, from the bricks and from the COV emission of every material, the insulation material, the like wooden paneling that constitute the kind of separation, but also reviving masons' work and having like a team of masons be like taught again how to use and how to build with brick in this building. So the work of the hand is one that gets us in touch with the environment and reminds us in a way that we are part of this environment and we're a continuity of nature. And we try to work with this on different scales, moving from the architectural scale to the scale of the hand and to the scale also of the object, like this earth bar that you just seen, but also as a way of bringing the community together, whether be it in France or in Japan. And moving to Beirut. So this is a building that I would try to explain a little bit further, and it's a project in Beirut and is very close to the port area. We're really at the junction between the port of Beirut, but also the city center of Beirut. Beirut, when I talk about archaeology, actually Beirut is a city that is constant archaeology. It's a place that is always unveiling its guts every time a building wants to be risen. It's talking about the civilization that had passed this Levantine city. It's also talking about how nature exists in relationship to the ground. Bringing us back to this ground, to earth actually, that we constantly cover with concrete and streets, and making us think actually how we constructed our cities today as car cities. Some situations that are quite precarious, where in a very small geography we can really see the problems and the challenges that we are facing all over the world. Challenges of housing, but also of relating to history and memory. And here we see this photo of Beirut during Ottoman times with these red tiled roofs that at the moment is kind of disappearing, as we see these developers' towers just rising and occupying the landscape. And it's a view actually that we see quite often all over the world as well, how these developers' towers are like invading our buildscape, as we as architects, we build a very small percentage of the planet. And actually, the site of this project is also very close to the city center. So Beirut city center was destroyed during the war, and after that, in '98, was reconstructed. And of course, the challenge here was how to deal with a destructed city, and is it about rebuilding it completely anew, and what happened to that scar? Can we take the time to heal, or how do we deal with the questions of reconstruction? And the fact of reconstructing completely anew the city center had also brought in an amnesia in Lebanon as well in relation to what had happened during the civil war. And actually the site, as we see it here, is very close to the city center, so it's concrete, it was a concrete manufacturer. It's the office also of a renowned architect, like modernist architect, who died and who gave away this land to his son and his family, Fuad al-Kouri. Fuad, who had taken Beirut during the war, actually, and in this book that was published in '92, had really encapsulated the memory of the city, scenes that we barely see again in the city center. But we see also how this kind of landscape is very much also like, as people in a way look like this landscape around. So this project in Beirut tries to capture these moments, really linking to this kind of notion of opening and what an opening could be in a city like Beirut, in a Mediterranean climate, how to measure the opening, but also how to transform the window into almost like a tool to see the city differently, to frame it, to kind of critique it, and capture its absurdities back in the heart of the apartments within. So we see here these photos that I took during the construction site, where we can take glimpses of the city, but also kind of talk about the memory, actually, of Beirut again. Another side, also, these openings are talking about nature. How can nature be part of architecture in a measured way in a Mediterranean climate, creating like this filter into almost kind of vernacular architecture, thinking of different scales of nature within the windows, and leaving the organicity of nature untamed, like it exists. Using this as a pretext to create different apartments on each level. So in a way, each level of apartments becomes different in opposition to these repetition of the same floors that we could see in the towers in the city. And the ground floor invites into the apartments that overlook the view of the sea, and we see here the view of the silo before 2020 explosion, and this kind of filter to the outside also that is always present with the nature around. So the building also like shape is really taking the shape of the site itself and making visible building regulation that we usually don't see in our construction and that shape our cities. So it does like kind of create this kind of amorphic structure that links to the ground. And in a way also talks about art within its ground floor. As we see here, there's on the ground floor a gallery that's dedicated to art and creation in the Middle East. And that's what we tried to talk about also in the Biennale, talking about like these precarious cities as places also where creation becomes very important as a way to kind of voice out the conflicts and the dynamics that are happening in there. And like we see productions of photography, like these photos of Gilbert Haj or Gregory Bouchakchian taking these derelict houses, left out houses, like capturing the memory of the city from with the artwork. The skin of a building, like a gown, is also work that we try to develop in closely actually with the artisans in place. So I wanted the building to really emerge from the ground itself, but also to talk about the craft and traditional techniques actually that are happening in place, like this plastering technique, reinventing it with new tools. So I drew this comb, and then we manufactured it on the height of a floor, and then the whole building was combed with these tools, where actually there is a link, an emotional link that was constructed between the craftspeople and the architecture of the building. And this actually started with this models in the atelier, and this moving from this kind of small clay models to the scale of the building itself, and combing the elevation, almost like a meditative process throughout the making. Moments also where we can see that it's almost like a section, as if it's unfinished as a construction within the city, changing in volumetry as one moves in the site. And here, after the explosion, actually, of Beirut, the building's skin and nature were actually intact, and of course, all the inside was completely torn away, but in a way built with a concrete structure in a zone actually that is quite seismic, so the building was able to stand in. And sometimes also talk about this kind of vernacular or even Mediterranean habits of just sitting outside and framing that moment of appropriation that happens in such cities. I see the zero here, like jumping. I'm just finishing. We see here some last views actually to understand the scale. Yeah, thank you.